colleagues and participants, good morning. On behalf of the Livenarch Committee, we would like to warmly welcome you all to Keynote Speaker Vibhuti Sachdev presentation. Before we begin, we would like to present a brief biography about the professor. Vibhuti Sachdev qualified as an architect from the School of Planning and Architecture in 1989. After a period spent in practice and research in India, she undertook a PhD in architectural theory at the School of Oriental and African Studies, which she completed in 1996. She was later lecturer in history of art in the University of Sussex, a post that she left in 2004 to return to India. She has worked as independent writer and lecturer and as consultant on conservation projects. Dr. Sachdev is an authority on Vastuvidya. Many of her publications concern these or related knowledge systems and their expression in architecture and art. She has worked extensively on the city of Jaipur, focusing on its architecture and craft traditions. Of the 4 books she has written, she is the co-author of 2 books on the city. Building Jaipur uses Jaipur as a test case for exploring change in planning theory and practice in India between the pre-colonial and postmodern eras. Jaipur City Palace discusses both the visual and social cultures of the city's primary former royal residence. Since publishing these books, Dr. Sachdev has been a consultant on the restoration of the Jal Mahal in Jaipur, was the design curator for the artwork of its pavilions and the co-curator of the exhibition Painted Pleasures. Her latest book is on the festivals at the Jaipur court. She joined Sushant School of Art and Architecture, Ansar University in 2014 and continues here as Dean of SSAA and as the director of the AU's Creative Cluster of Architecture, Planning and Design. I greet Professor Vibhuti Sachdev again on behalf of the Karadeniz Technical University and the Livenarch Committee. So, Professor, you can start your presentation when you are ready.
Thank you so much. And I will start my presentation. I will share my screen. Okay. Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity in the series called Other Architectures. What I propose to do is to focus on cultural identities in modern living. And I'm going to show a range of slides to project the diversity that Indian culture has, which most of you know, of course, both in terms of geographic diversity and cultural diversity, but also to pinpoint towards the fact that there is no one modernism, which we all feel that there are modernities. And how much does our idea of modernism support cultural diversity is the larger question. So there are modernisms, which is, which has an international element to it. There are national modernisms, there are cultural modernisms, and there are continuing traditions, which also, survive or are able to continue because of modernism. So the larger question then that is, which I would like to kind of for you to bear in mind while watching, while going through these slides and illustrations is, does the mainstream architectural practice accommodate cultural complexity or does it flatten the diversity? And of course, the hope is that, any development or architectural practice must nurture cultural diversity because that is what brings meaning and enrichment to our lives. But how does it do it? How can it do so? And in what ways can modernism help nurture and become a catalyst for for cultural diversity? So my opening slide is a page from a calendar, which is a bilingual calendar that most people in India would use. This is a bilingual calendar because it has the Gregorian calendar, which is in English, but also within it is a layer of the lunar calendar. And of course, there are lots of variations of the lunar calendar. Northern lunar calendar is different from the southern. Then there is, the Islamic calendar. There is the northeastern calendar is slightly different. So having said that, what I want you to focus on is that these two ways of mapping time that are very much present in our culture, and the lunar calendar decides the festival dates, for example. And so, our festivals do not match with the dates of the Gregorian calendar because it follows the lunar calendar. So the names of the festivals are drawn from the dates that are governed by the lunar calendar. The seasons are governed by the lunar calendar, and yet we have most of the the institutionalized framework that uses the Gregorian calendar. So this in itself is a complexity that one needs to grapple with, one comes to terms with, one learns to live with on a daily basis. And then there are sort of examples in modern art. For example, this is a sculpture by an artist called Satish Gupta, and it is, to say, a Western eye would be a man with wings, but you ask any person within Indian cultural realm, for them, or who are aware of the cultural significance of this sculpture, it is Garud, which is a mythological bird. And nobody would hesitate in calling it Garud, yet it will be labeled, internationally as, described as maybe man with wings. So what I'm suggesting is that there is a modernity or modern expressions that feed on the cultural diversity, the cultural complexity that we have in India. Again, I mean, this, for example, is to an Indian eye is Narad, and who is again a mythological figure, and he's instantly recognized by the instrument he carries, and yet he's with a mobile phone, and very much a living person. So he can't be God, but he's playing as God. But what I'm saying is these are images and plays that are very much part of our modern living, and these figures, these cultural references, are very much part of our daily life. Also, we have remnants of our past, such as our royal past. So there are a lot of princely states which still do continue their courtly culture in many ways. And this is a picture which shows a royal elephant with all the fabric and the throne and the jewelry that that the elephant wears in an entourage. And this still carries on. This is a picture of a recent festival in Jaipur where elephants are decorated, and they wear makeup and jewelry and are adorned with similar the costumes and fabric and textiles even today. So there is a continuing tradition, as it were, but very much entrenched in within modern living. And in the festivals are a great unifier of a city. A festival, when that happens, everybody sort of comes together in a similar mood, wearing similar clothes, doing similar things, eating similar food. So it's a kind of a very much, builds community around festive fervor and mood. And this still continues. And nobody argues against a festival. So everybody kind of obediently wears, the colors that are associated with the festival and would enjoy. And this is something that, builds community relationships, builds the culture of the city. Yet it is very modern. It is very here and now. There's nothing kind of ancient about it. I mean, it's a continuing tradition, but it's also modern. The buildings of our past as we see them today, and if you see a picture of this palace in Jaipur, and you can see that, of course, this is an 18th century palace, and you can see the modern additions to it in terms of even the air conditioners that are there. And also you get a glimpse of what it would have looked like, in the 18th century. And this, still continues. And you can see, a similar building being clothed with fabric, with awnings, with chicks, with a very much kind of an outdoor culture that India was, and especially in northern India, of which this example is from, because of the climate, because of the context. This outdoor culture is something that perhaps is somewhat depleted in its in its functionality today because of the thermal air conditioning that has helped us stay indoors much more. But this is what the palace would have looked like, with shading devices which were made of textiles, and the building would kind of change like human beings change with seasons. You wear warmer clothes in winter, you wear lighter clothes in summer, and similarly the building would also be dynamic in terms of its awnings and shading devices and cooling systems, which were mostly passive. One of the great influences of modernity, of course, is cinema, and cinema has had a major influence on how Indian culture is perceived, and also how it is disseminated. And it has also had a great, I think, influence on liberation of women, on empowering women, and these are some of the glamorous figures of the 1950s when modernism was in its heyday, and you can see that although there are examples of Western dress, that even the sari and the Indian clothes were kind of modernized and went through a cycle of in terms of textile, in terms of how it was wrapped, what kind of colors were in fashion. So it's not as if if somebody is wearing a sari, it is it's a sign of ancient tradition. No, because even ancient traditions, because they are continuing traditions, go through modernities, through every change, every rethink, and this is an example of that. In terms of architecture, also, if you see, look at sacred architecture. Now, these are a set of photographs to a sort of, I wouldn't call it an untrained eye, or to a casual viewer. These temples look the same, whereas one of them is there are a couple which are older. There is one that is recent, 20th century. And then there is one that is not even in India. It's in England. So what I'm suggesting is that in some ways there is a kind of also a fossilization that takes place in terms of the sacred imagery. But what may look like sort of fossilized in terms of imagery actually has reinvented itself internally and to some extent externally, and modernized itself. The set of images I would now show you, and some of them are stock images, also to show that there is so much dissemination of these kind of images over the internet as well, and nobody sort of bats an eyelid or even questions as to why people in these images are doing what they're doing. There is a man on the top left. He's offering a coconut to a truck. There is on lower left, tools of construction are worshipped, and there is a portrait of Vishwakarma, who's god of architecture, and this is a common sight again on many construction sites, especially on Vishwakarma Day, who's known as the divine architect. He's worshipped, and beginning of any construction, the tools of construction will be worshipped. And lower right is an image which is not in India. It's somewhere in America. And the priest is worshipping a brand new car, which would probably not be liked by many, but he's throwing flowers, he's offering saffron, flowers, and to a brand new car to wish it well. So obviously a vehicle is culturally regarded as a member of the family, is regarded as, it also has a gender. It also kind of is treated as someone as a living being would be treated. And also is kind of worshipped and looked after because the automobile looks after the people who ride it on a daily basis. So there is a relationship with the inanimate object. And this is something that's very, very strongly entrenched in one's mindset. Again, a common sight, regardless of the style in which one builds in, regardless of the what building it is, whether it's modern, ultra modern, high tech, a ritual is performed during its foundation. So this is the foundation laying ceremony. That is again a common sight at the beginning of any construction. One would have the owners and the priests, and would perform a ritual to sort of pacify the earth, because you're digging the earth. So to kind of it's a little prayer for the well-being of the inhabitants of the building. So you see this again is part of a modern construction process. And somehow, to most people in India who perform this, they don't see the dichotomy. They don't see as to why it is done and where is the need, and the fact that, to an outsider, it might look as a misfit or even as something that is not required. But it is very much a part of modern construction process that you would perform a foundation laying ceremony, regardless of the architectural style and process. And then we have, a very, very unique relationship with the plants, and some plants are regarded as holy, spiritual, having certain energy, and again, these images show that. The certain rituals are performed during certain times of the season, the year, where the spirits of the trees would be invoked, and some trees, like people, for example, is regarded as possessing very high energy. Plants like tulsi, for example, is holy basil. That is regarded as as almost God, and this tulsi plant, which is placed in the courtyard of a house, is worshipped every day, and so again, what I'm suggesting is that this is also modern. This is also modern, to have a relationship with plants, and I think, and the significance of this within modern architecture should be acknowledged and nurtured, rather than regarded as something as superfluous or unnecessary or even unscientific. This set of slide is to show the relationship with within the cultural mindset one has with animals. For example, the cow is well known, and there are temples dedicated to. This one is the Deshnuk temple, which is dedicated to rats. There is snake worship that happens during the monsoon. Just before the monsoon, people feed ants. Animals have significance in daily, ritual activity, as well as seasonal rituals. And also, there are omens associated with birds. For example, if there's a crow, in your house, means you're going to have visitors. And it's not just a matter of, I don't think this is superstition. I think this is sort of, being connected with nature, with plants and animals around us, and also feeling that you're part of this ecosystem, not outside of it, but within it. So as to feel that this is how one has to coexist with other things in the world. With water is again, apart from the fantastic water architecture that India has in terms of step wells, in terms of ghats, there is a relationship with water as a kind of a living entity. So these scenes are again very common next to rivers like Ganga and Yamuna, and you have women offering food to the river goddess, and the Ganga Aarti, which happens in Banaras every day in the evening. is a fantastic, spectacular ritual. And to treat a kind of a river as a living goddess is something that one could, learn from, to make, to make sort of develop infrastructure that supports this mindset, because it is a very important way of thinking that, that river is a living entity that needs to be looked after, that, that looks after us, of course, but also it needs looking after. And it's so how much of the modern infrastructure actually supports it, or on ground does it support it, or even at places it opposes it, which is what is needs to be rethought. Whether there is a place and room that could be made for such rituals, such activities that take place throughout the year. But these activities take place regardless of the lack of support that, modern infrastructure provides. And with fruits and there are iconic motifs that have continued throughout our civilization in India. For example, the Purna Kumbha, the lower right is a kind of an assembly of a pot with a coconut with leaves, and this kind of signifies the entire creation with all the 5 elements. And this is a symbol that has carried on throughout time and culture, but has also evolved and is modern as well. And so you see it in Amravati, which is a Buddhist site, and you see it in many monuments today depicted in beautiful, carved reliefs. Also, you see this in daily ritual, which is so common. I mean, you find it in stock photos as well, but it's the same essence of capturing the entire creation in a pot and coconut and leaves, and this signifies all the 5 elements. And this is common sight even today. And so one should regard it as modern. Now, to kind of just highlight or draw attention to some of the differences, maybe, which ought to be celebrated rather than ironed out. One such difference is music. Western music is sheet music, it's written music. So with written music that is performed, and then you have great composers who will perform their music following the written composition. Whereas Indian raga is not written. In an Indian raga, there is an agreement that certain notes will follow a certain structure, but the musician or the performer is free to deviate from it, meander into other expressions, as long as the arrangement of the notes is followed. So there is no written code. So therefore, each performance of a raga is different each time, and it can be completely differently arranged in terms of the pauses, the meanderings, and so each performance, although sticks to the raga and is identifiable as the particular musical composition, each performance is unique and different. So these are some of the examples of, even when you watch mythological play like, Ram Leela, and the story, but each time it is performed, how it is performed, what are the examples it includes in its performance is going to be different each time. So there is a uniqueness within a continuing tradition. That is what I'm suggesting, that there is, although there is continuity, there is also uniqueness. So this uniqueness is very much like the modern uniqueness. So it is very modern, even though it looks, old and traditional. It is modern because the context, because of the time, is here and now. And also, I think it is very uniquely, in the culture I'm talking about, the Indian culture I'm talking about, is the cross-disciplinarity of music and dance and painting, of artistic expressions. And on the top right is an image of a raga, and we've got these ragamala paintings that are depictions of musical compositions. So again, very uniquely, Indian, in the sense that, very few cultures would have painted music, for example. So, and these series, although exist in many Kotli cultures, these are painted in different architectural and landscape settings, which then makes it modern and unique. And although it continues as a tradition, it is still sort of a modern in its expression. This set of images is to draw your attention to, differences in aesthetics and differences in the idea of beauty. On the top right is a Gainsborough painting of a European couple spending an evening in countryside, hunting, perhaps an aristocratic couple with a hunting dog. And you can see in its scenery and the clothes, and this is very, very sort of quintessential European setting, of the 1750s. And bottom left is also a painting of the same period of an Indian couple in the evening. So it's the same situation. And there is scenery, and there is open space, there is music, there is recreation. But the idea of, the way they're dressed, the music, and you can hear the music in your ear, and you can, even there's a full moon. So what I'm saying is the occasion is similar, the expression is different. And you have examples of some of the sculptures, Apollo, Venus, and Buddha, the Gandhara period. Then you have Mohini. So in their expression, these are all, regarded as beautiful icons, aesthetically superlative images, expressions of beauty and perfection. But you can see the differences of, the way Mohini is pictured under a full-blown mango tree, admiring herself in a mirror, the jewelry, the costume, and the entire pose is very, very different and stylized. All are stylized. I mean, I'm not suggesting that Mohini is more stylized than Apollo is, but the stylization is different. The expression is different. And on the top right is an image of Nath Dwara, who's a Krishna in Nathdwara, and regarded by his devotees as the most handsome man. So the aesthetic expression of the perfect man between, you know, Apollo and the Nathdwara image are different, but they are, you know, expressions of beauty, both of them, and to understand the multiplicities of expression, the diversity of expression should, in a way, I think, should be nurtured by modern architecture as well. And the other thing, you know, is diverse is the way in which we have food, for example. So top left is, you know, a table setting, European table setting of where, you know, several courses of dinner or lunch or you know, will be served. And bottom left is also where various courses of dinner and lunch will be served. And you can see that the enjoyment, the way food is enjoyed, the way it is eaten, the way it is relished, the way you know, contextually it is consumed is diverse. And so how does you know, architecture, how can architecture, our spatial context, nurture this diversity? How can the spatial context actually make this cultural difference evolve rather than wipe out, or regard it as less significant, or regard it as not modern enough? And as most people know that, you know, India is full of examples of architecture styles, anonymous architecture, you know, and vernacular architecture, some may call it, but you know, the styles and the expressions in architecture are also so varied because of the context, because of the region, because of even of course functions, and modernism somehow has ended up not supporting this diversity in terms of the kinds of materials that are institutionalized. For example, architecture, as also we know, is the most capital intensive business. So and depends a lot on, you know, institutionalized mechanisms and processes, and none of that seem to be supporting the diversity that you know, India can offer in terms of architectural expressions. So there is a, you know, huge spread of concrete, of cement, of, you know, machine produced stuff, which is also okay, but equal, if not more, support is required for buildings in bamboo, in mud, in wood, in using local techniques of, you know, and we have to find ways of doing that within our modern process. And I think it is very, very urgently required to do this if we want to safeguard, or at least help continue the diversity of architecture that is around us. So with that, I would like to complete my slides and would welcome any questions that there may be for discussion. Thank you.
I think there is no question in this time. And there is one hand rising.
Okay.
Hello, Professor. I welcome you. My name is Asu Beşken, and I'm one of the organizing committee member. Thank you for your presentation. It's great to know the details about India in the cultural scale of modernism and experience in your country. My question is, we know that modernism bases on the concept of new. And we knew, all the architects knew that Le Corbusier's works about modernism in India. I wonder, what about the new works about modernism on the basis of new in India? Is there any cultural works or an example going through the way of Le Corbusier's modernism in India right now? Thank you very much again.
Sure, I think, Le Corbusier and Louis Kahn, as we know, that have had tremendous influence on Indian architecture, especially in the cities like Delhi and Ahmedabad, and Chandigarh, of course, is the most significant work built by Le Corbusier. And also, it had a lot of influence on how the architects built afterwards, especially in popularizing concrete, popularizing brick. And there are now practices in India, which you will be happy to hear, which are actually looking at indigenous architecture and looking at examples of and techniques used in indigenous architecture and how to kind of take that forward into the future. So there are some small interesting practices also. I mean, also bear in mind that while these big things were going on in Ahmedabad and Chandigarh, Auroville was also getting built. So, which is a completely different set of practices that have evolved into different kinds of modern expression. So it's not just, and there are also lots of regional practices which are not of very well-known architects, but there are people who are working on these regional, lesser-known architects. And Peter Scriver is one architectural historian who's worked on other architects other than these very well-known architects. So there is a complexity within that realm as well. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Professor. Looking forward to meeting you face-to-face for the next conferences.
Yes, would love to. Thank you.
Professor, there is no question and time is up. We thanks you for impressive presentation and participants for contributions. We will meet again at 11 a.m. for the session, and this time we will take a break. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.